Teach your children well. Their father's help did slowly go by.
Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for attending. My name is Kimberly Moses, and I'll be your moderator today. And I would like to introduce our education committee that has prepared this lesson today, which is Peter, Joyce, Wade, there you go, Austin, and Carolyn. And then we have an honorary member down in LA, which is Kathy Venn. She's been joining us quite a bit as well, which has been great. The title of this event is Closing Oakland's Public Schools, Debt Used as a Weapon of Social and Political Control. And it is sponsored by the Oakland East Bay area of the League of Revolutionaries for a New America, acronym LRNA. And again, it's organized by our education committee, the Committee on League Education in Oakland, and that's the acronym CLEO. Who are we? We are an organization of working people from different backgrounds and experiences dedicated to helping to elevate the consciousness of other revolutionaries in the classroom, in the workplace, in the street, our various areas and organizations that we are involved in, and in all areas of struggle. We work to politicize, raising the issues of private property and the need for working class power. Mute if you're not speaking, please. This lesson is part 2 of a 3-part series inspired by our area assessment, focusing on the crisis in housing, education, and the struggle over governance. The intention of this lesson today is to bring further attention to the corporate attack being waged on the Oakland Unified School District and to highlight the leadership of the warriors that are engaged in this struggle. Also, how this issue intersects with other critical issues of housing and homelessness, access to healthcare, and the fight over governance in the interests of the working class. This is a platform that is a safe space for learning and sharing of information and ideas. Okay, and with that, we're going to go right into our reading. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right, can everybody see that? Needs to be a little bigger?
Little bigger.
Okay. How's that?
Good.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we usually start again by, we'll take turns with the reading, so give everybody a chance, to stay engaged in it, and any volunteers. And then once you finish reading a couple of paragraphs, just say pass and we can go to the next one. I'll go ahead and get started. Access to public education expanded to the formerly enslaved and poor white farmers during the Reconstruction period. During the early decades of the US industrial period, the capitalist structure needed workers, and the public education system was funded to help serve the needs of industry by training generations of workers. Now, in the age of automation and digital technology, funding education for the new advances of production is too expensive when cheaper labor overseas is available already with these skills. The entire world is undergoing a leap from one economic base, production with human labor, to another without human labor. New tools introduced in the last stage of electromechanical industry have created a break from the past development of the economy. New tools, new forms of automation using no human labor have begun to replace the old. A new epic of human history is upon us, brought by the microchip, computer, and robot. And that's an excerpt from Rally Comrades. The struggle over public education is a defining battle of this stage that working people find themselves. Quality schools with adequately compensated teachers, modern facilities, and universal access to families is imperative for the health of communities. Public schools, foundational to communities, provide many services in addition to being centers of education, as they serve as meeting spaces, access to social and neighborhood services, and safe spaces for our kids. When neighborhood schools are consolidated or closed, it has a foundational impact on communities, particularly communities of color. Just as working people need quality local community schools, corporate interest has identified public schools as a means to have unfettered access to public resources as a means to make and secure profit. Local government is paving the way for corporate interests to control and take over this critical public resource. This is corporate dictatorship and is the core of fascism. I will pass here. Steve, would you like to read?
Just note, Rita had her hand up.
Okay. Okay, Miss Rita, did you have a question?
Shall I read?
Yes, please.
A new class of workers is being created as successive waves of work go out of existence. It is being pushed out of the economy as it cannot work for wages needed to buy the necessities of life. This creates a problem for the ruling class. The new class must fight for access for food, homes, and water, even though it has no money to secure those things. It is compelled to transform society into public ownership of the new tools of production. The ruling class is reorganizing the government to attempt to stabilize the situation and protect their interests by merging the state and all its financial, political, and military power with the corporations. That objective base of fascism allows the corporations to shift the burden of the crisis onto the backs of the workers. These are the economics of fascism. As the burden becomes intolerable and the people begin to resist, the state will clamp down, destroying what little democracy exists and attempting to prevent any struggle of the people. This is the social face of fascism. I'll pass there.
Okay. Anyone else would like to read?
I can read.
Okay, great.
Veiled by the use of terms privatization, parent choice, control over public schools equates to control over public land, power to control access to housing, and the ability to reshape a community socially and politically. The battle over public schools in Oakland and the greater East Bay is not only a fight to preserve access to education, but a fight against reorganizing of society for corporate interests. How is this being accomplished in OUSD? The Alameda County of Education, or the ACOE, told Oakland Unified School District officials that they must cut the budget by $90 million and threatened, if the district does not take sufficient steps by end of January, to withhold the salaries of the school board and superintendent, Kyla Johnson Trammell, and place the district under direct control of the state's Bakersfield-based nonprofit agency, the Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team, or the FCMAT. According to November 8th letter to the district from ACOE, Superintendent Monroe, quote, under state guidance, the district has closed about 20 schools, mostly in Black and Latinx flatland schools, with the direct encouragement of FCMAT, even though FCMAT has recognized that closing schools does not save money. Under the leadership of FCMAT and the county since 2003, the district has faced almost continual budget cuts, has stayed in debt, and has relied on a revolving door of privatizing administrators and consultants, many who appear to pass through Oakland as a career stepping stone. Pass.
I can read, or
Yeah.
unless somebody else is ready.
Just that little piece right there, in the discussion question, and then we'll be stopping there.
Okay, starting with where?
Working class warriors.
Class warriors. Okay, working class warriors are engaged at all levels of this fight, including elected school board officials, teachers, and community activists. There is a great need for all parents, students, and communities at large to understand how this fight intersects with their collective struggle for housing, healthcare, and safe communities. Discussion question: what are we facing? Why does corporate interest have to close schools?
Mhm. Yes. So we're going to have a little discussion of that question there. We also have Mike Hutchinson joining us shortly, who can give us an update on the emerging conditions. It seems to be changing very rapidly. So we will, alert everybody when he's on and available. But Stack is open. What are we facing, and why does corporate interest have to close schools? Why have the corporate interests identified schools as a means or a way to make money? I see your hand, Steve. Go ahead.
What's certainly true is that the school situation has always been tied to the situation of financializing housing here in Oakland, which started about 2015. Certainly, you had roots earlier than that. It's always been too high, but as they drive up the prices for rentals and things like this, people can't afford to live here. So then they say, oh, well, we can't have small classrooms with lots of teachers. We have to fill the classrooms up for 35 students, just like always. And so that leaves empty buildings, which they then say, well, we can close these, and they've already used some of them for real estate. The issue is in Oakland is that market rate housing runs everything. The city went way over its targets for market rate housing and never even got to like 20% of its targets for affordable housing. This is in exactly the same area where these schools are closing. So they're incentivizing charter schools by closing the schools, and they're incentivizing and working with the realtors where, what do you know, all of this market rate housing is opening up right there in West Oakland and moving towards the east as fast as it can. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public schools is a hot topic going on now in terms of people taking over school boards, trying to politicize, things like, well, trying to call everything critical race theory. And there's operatives operating on these school boards or coming to school board meetings. Okay, I see.
Yolanda and Raphael.
Okay, thank you. Yolanda.
And Rosemary.
Kimberly.
Yes, I got you. Go ahead, Yolanda. Are you muted?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I read some of the People's Tribune articles about how with the advent of technology, which is replacing labor as we know it, that then the establishment no longer feels they have to educate the people, that the working people especially, that had to know how to read and write in order to be able to do a job. So I think that's part of it too, that just the fact that education was given to us, but it was out of the need for profit more than to actually help the people here, uh, educate us or anything else. So that's all I wanted to say. The advent of technology has made it technology, robots don't need to know how to read or write.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Well,
Kim, I see Rosemary, Lewis, Kimberly. I think Kimberly was first, then
yeah.
Rosemary, then Lewis.
Okay. So Raphael was also on stack. Go ahead.
I don't see.
Yeah, I'm a high school teacher. I've been teaching for 22 years here in the Fresno area, Madera, California specifically. You know, I don't think it's a new phenomenon, but I think, you know, this is part of the trend to continue to commoditize things, including education. And COVID, the pandemic, is a perfect opportunity for, you know, capitalism and for capitalists to come on in, swoop on in, and take advantage of this crisis and make something out of, quote, nothing, right? Materially, you don't necessarily need much to teach on Zoom or teach via whatever platform you're doing it on. So it's a last ditch effort, I think, at least at a greater level. I can't speak specifically to Oakland Unified School District, but it's a last ditch effort, I think, to keep, you know, bringing in that money, and especially to get rid of public schools. And as much as people like to bash public schools, it's and judging from my, you know, students, my students are, many of them from indigenous communities in Mexico. A lot of them are Black, young youth who, you know, the only place they really find themselves is in a public school, whereas in a private schools, some of them who have had attended those, they aren't allowed to express ideas. They aren't allowed to do certain things. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that. It's just, you know, I'll tune in because I can't speak to Oakland situation, but I don't think this is necessarily a new thing.
Not at all. Thank you. Miss Kim King.
I'm going to pass because there's some other people's hands up, and I really was going to say something very similar to what Yolanda said, is to draw attention to the role of the breaking of the relationship between the capitalists and the workers, and really understanding that education was not created to be nice to us. Education was created to train workers so that corporations could make profits.
Mhm.
As they don't need as many workers, they're not going to educate us in the same way. So
Mhm.
that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Rosemary.
Yeah, and I would also add with education, I'm down in LA, and education, if you have an educated population, if you're trained to be analytical, if you're allowed to organize and learn your real history and become empowered to understand the future and your role in building it, that is against the kind of education the capitalists want. They don't want people educated. Education should be for liberation, and that's exactly the opposite. And the schools are also, we're really pushing for community-based schools in LA, and the students have been leading that fight along with teachers and parents, because schools are can be like the focus point of a community, and you know, that's where people can come for all kinds of services. And it's interesting that all over, a lot of students are speaking up and saying, hey, this is about us. Listen to us. We have our future. We should be talking about what's going on with us. And so that whole thing, I mean, if you're teaching, it's all this test, and selling the idea to parents, put your kids in a charter school because they'll have a chance to get a job that's better, instead of making it an individual thing, just like COVID. It's up to you to wear the mask and get the vaccinations. And education should be preparing students, empowering them for our future, because they are our future. And a lot of the students know it and are rising up about it.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Thank you, Rosemary. Lewis.
Yes, so my name is Lewis, and my background is more out of the community colleges. I just retired from Laney College last year after teaching the machine technology program with Peter for the past 17 years. I think we need to look at the idea of education as much broader than just the public K through 12 system. We have three components that are part of the public education system directly funded by the community, and that's K through 12, adult education, and the community colleges. And there's efforts to dismantle all three of these at different rates.
Mhm.
Adult education in Oakland was cut by something like 95 or 98% during the crisis in 2011, the they call a recession, but was really a depression in our community.
Mhm.
And community colleges are being put on a student-centered funding formula, which is also going to cut funding. But the really, I think, the largest actual population of students, potential students in Oakland and our Laney district, which is Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda, Emeryville, and Piedmont, is the adult education population. There's something like 160,000 people that do not have GEDs or high school diplomas that are in the above 18-year age. The other thing I think is a real contradiction is a community college, which one of their primary functions is provide a trained workforce. They're being held harmless, which means we're being funded at 2018-19 funding rates to the fall of 2024. So we're having basically 3 years to recover from COVID. OUSD and the high K through 12 system is asked to be recovered basically still in the COVID system right now. You know, COVID heavily impacted, but they're being asked to go back to the full ADA funding next year. And I don't understand that at all. I mean, why should the K through 12 system be asked to recover immediately, and the community colleges have basically a 2.5 year recovery period? And so those are just some of the things I'd like to bring up. But I think that one of the things that we really need to address as part of any discussion about education is the adult ed population, primarily probably immigrants, and then people that have, especially now, have dropped out of the educational system because the ability to learn online.
Yes. Very good. And a lot of the debt, the economics part of this we'll be getting into the second part of the lesson as well. So the next on stack I have is Rhea.
I just want to ask quickly, which I know might need like its own info session in and of itself, but is anyone willing to like break down in a nutshell why corporate, it's like charter schools align with corporate interests? I mean, I know I already recognize that charter schools are the reason that like deprive public schools, and which is bad, you know, which is a bad thing, but like in anything else would be helpful for me.
Good question. Well, I'm going to call on one of our experts in here. Steve, would you like to take a crack at answering Rhea's question in 2 minutes?
Unmute, Steve.
Unmute.
Charter schools divert money from public schools. They claim that they serve special needs kids, but they drive them out and back into the charter schools. The law is rigged so that you get your ADA based on where you are in like September 20th. That's the day they measure the population. So right after that, the charter schools kick out all the kids who are more difficult to teach language kids, kids who don't read as much, kids without the resources at home, et cetera, et cetera. So then they go back to the public schools, but the public schools don't have the money. It stays with the charter schools. That's just one scam. They got a zillion of them. Funny thing that the charter schools can do all this testing right there in schools in the appropriate fashion, but public schools get dumped on with these tests that are 25% not working, and kids got to take them home individually, or they use them in schools. It's almost like when people were smoking weed in the bathroom. You hey, come in, I got a test. It's that desperate because the kids are really worried about this. You know, they've caught on. You heard that at the Oakland School Board meeting on Wednesday. Boy, they were roasting the school board. And so just one other aspect is that while charter schools may be quote unquote nonprofit, they usually rent from the same people who own the charter schools, but have a profit-making corporation, an LLC that they set up that the charter school pays rent to. So that's one way they make money. They're discriminatory all over the country. They don't teach as well as public schools. I mean, we could go on and on, but I'll stop there.
And I would probably just add to that, that's very good, Steve, is that it's been a plan to basically commodify public education through charters, which they're not public schools, but they're given public money, they're given, in a lot of cases, given public buildings. You know, some are leased, some are just outright given to them. And it all, you know, takes resources, public resources away. And then you have also the eye of real estate that's on all this land that's owned by the Oakland Unified School District, as well as community college. We all, you know, can think the whole attempt of the A's to take over Laney, right? So, okay. Peter.
Yeah, just one little addition. One of the things charter schools, which have now been described by a court as businesses, not education groups, is that they allow the corporation running them to choose whether they're going to put all the resources into the education in the school in a community that they decide is worthwhile, like a wealthier community, or in a poorer community that they're less interested in. They can just take resources, they can take profit out of it in various ways that have been described, and let it be a crappy school. They get to choose. And when it becomes too obviously criminal, some of them get caught, but the incentive is still there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anybody else? We still have a little time in this section.
Gloria Sandoval.
Yeah, what I wanted to add on to the conversation is 6 years ago, I retired as a high school counselor. And at that time, 6 years ago, you could already see the implementation of a part of the corporations when the libraries got rid of all of the books in the library. All the kids had Chromebooks. Those had to be purchased by the school, which was, you know, a lot of profit for the corporation. Also, Wi-Fi, you know, that put the poorer students out of commission and being able to keep up. So that gap started forming between those that had those resources and those that didn't. And I know, you know, when I try to talk to some of my counselor colleagues about, you know, the education system leaving behind some of these students, they said, oh, well, technology is the wave of the future. So we just got to go with that. Kind of like, forget you know, let's sacrifice, you know, the poor kids. No, it was no fault at all of their own, but I kind of saw that, you know, a process involving. The other thing I want to say is that being inside the schools, there was really no parent involvement. The administrators would run the schools. And so you kind of see a system where there is no input by the parents themselves, or they're afraid. But I think that is key, has always been key, but they've never really facilitated the involvement of parents in the running of schools. And I did have, just one last comment, I did have experience with some of these independent charter schools, and some of the kids were really interested in it because they didn't have to leave home. They didn't have to, do anything. The entire family could be, on these independent studies, but many of them went broke, and kids couldn't get their, credits from there to transfer them to the new school. It was just chaos. It was just, we even saw that at the university level, right? Where they took the money and ran for that. So all of those things kind of have to remind us that, someone's just trying to use public education for profit. Thank you.
Thank
I'm seeing Rosemary, Steve, and myself again on stack. And if anybody else puts up their hand, I'll go after them because I've spoken.
Okay. Rosemary.
Okay, quick point about charters. They would cherry pick the best students. They would not let, a lot of times they would not let students in who are English language learners or who had special needs. Secondly, the school to prison pipeline, all the money that went for school police, and instead of counseling, et cetera, which is, and school psychologists, which is being fought through in various school districts. Charters also lead into the voucher system, which money would be given to everybody to like send your kid to a private school if you want. And the whole question of federal funding, there's no federal funding for schools, so it's based on property tax, and we know how that discriminated. And finally, the internet should be a public good that's available to everybody. Right there off the bat, you're discriminating against people who have no access or can't afford it. And again, the school to prison pipeline, there's more money invested in school and prisons than in school. So it's another big source of income for capitalists.
Yes. Very good. Next on stack is Steve.
Actually, Rita hasn't spoken yet, and I just noticed she had her hand up.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay, you know what? I did not see Rita on there. Okay.
Oh.
Thank you. Miss Rita.
Unmute, please, Rita. Still not hearing you, Rita. Let's see, can I unmute you?
Is it, see, I can't see
Is it
everybody.
Retta or Rita?
It's Retta.
I'll try, I can't unmute her.
No, there's something wrong with your sound, Retta. Oh, there you go.
There she goes.
Yay.
Hello, everyone. No, I raised my hand to say that I couldn't hear the volume.
Can you hear better now?
Yes, I can. I can hear. So I didn't mean to interrupt the flow of the conversation.
Okay.
Well, now you're part of it.
Well, now
Is there anything you'd like to say?
Not at this point. I'm being educated.
So are we all.
Very good. All right. Okay, well, Peter, I see your hand. I see Miss Emma's hand.
Steve was up.
And Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll put you back on stack, Steve. Okay. So I see Miss Emma. She's muted, so I don't know if anybody Ethel or Austin.
Yeah,
if you're with us. Hi, Miss Emma.
Hi. I was in school in Chicago, and the school that I went to, it was, it was, it was, it was, what is it? It was for people with disabilities. And it was complicated, because the kids with disabilities, they had to say, oh my God, other school and the other kids had to say, on the other school. But I to the other school, they was looking at us like, what you guys doing here? So it was like more again, more abiding. So she's covering a lot of ground. Would you like me to translate?
Yeah,
She
please.
said she went to school in Chicago, and she went to where she went to school. They part of it was basically segregated for children with kids with disabilities, and I guess at some point they would supposedly be integrated at some stage, but by that point there was so much discrimination against them that there was a lot of hard looking. It really wasn't, they really were not integrated in. And she said it was almost like a gang. The, you know, her emphasis on the idea that, you know, separate was definitely not equal. Did you have something? That's what she wanted to offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see Peter.
I think Steve was first.
And Steve was first. Steve, go ahead. And if you have any updates from the last school board meeting, that would be good as well.
Well, that's a big issue. Basically, the community repudiated the school board leadership completely. And the only one who was being really strong was Mike Hutchinson. Van Cedric Williams was also supporting the right direction. But the rest of these people said there's no Omicron in our schools, and the kids just tore them to pieces without anchor. They just said, you're not even hearing us. Here's my school. And bam, they tell the stories one after the other. But I also wanted to explain the setup, because this year's schools were set up. Everybody knows that reopening is a big issue. So the federal government behind the scenes forced all schools to reopen. In California, it is illegal for a school to have online services. This was passed by Gavin Newsom, who's a Democrat. And so therefore, they trashed their whole online that they developed during 2021, and that forced the kids to go back to school. This was to stampede families. So we see where it's at now, where teaching has collapsed, where the kids tell you that they're put in auditoriums because there's not enough teachers, and they're sitting there on their laptop all day long. It's just ridiculous. This does not happen in charter schools, because charter schools did not have to trash their online infrastructure that they built. So they can be much more flexible in dealing with their population. Secondly, because they forced everybody back into school, it's now all based on ADA. Funding is average daily attendance. And so we have the total collapse of ADA. On one hand, you have to report your attendance every day so that California will send you the money. On the other hand, students and staff are staying home and they can barely get ADA. And so next year, their schools, public schools, will be cut because their ADA goes down. That's not a requirement for charter schools. Because they don't have, they get paid whether the kids are there or not. They can arrange their situation. And there's a variety, but you see this, how the scam was done. They forced people into schools. We have the collapse of the entire funding system of public education right now, just like all the standardized testing has collapsed because you can't test the kids if they're not in school and haven't learned anything. And guess what? That's what's going on. So it is likely that we will see a walkout of students on Tuesday, a massive walkout. We've seen these in Chicago, New York, Baltimore, all over the place. They're quite significant, and the kids themselves know that they are not safe and they're not getting educated. And these are the same kids that are dealing with the bigger questions that we're all looking at, like climate crisis and ecological collapse. I'm done.
Very good. Okay, I have, looks like 2 more people on stack. I got Peter and Carolyn.
Very good, thanks. I want to start by echoing what Louis raised. And I think everybody on this call probably knows that this is a very broad attack. It goes into adult education, community colleges, and all of higher ed. The reason we're doing this Zoom meeting about K through 12 is because this is where the center of the fight is right now. The community is in an uproar over it because K through 12 kids are dependent on their parents, and that makes the K through 12 public school, K through 12 schools central to the life of the community. Hence, it is having this big, broad effect on everybody. But sooner or later, and Louis and Kimberly can and I can talk for ages about the kinds of attacks that have gone on against Laney, which is constantly underfunded. And big real estate has tried to get its hand in there in big ways. But I don't want to take time from the general discussion about that. So I just wanted to note that.
Good. Carolyn, you're next.
Go. Yeah, I just wanted to mention Emma's education. Under industrial capitalism, people with disability brought in a large sum of profit for, those that own and rule things. And it was very hard. The parent had to know what to ask for to make sure that your child got some kind of education. The only reason Emma is as independent as she is now is because she was in school from the day that we learned that she had a disability to now. And under electronic technology, how the labor of disabled people are used is different. They haven't mastered a method for that yet. But under industrial capitalism, they mastered and they knew how to get profit out of the disability people.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And there was a concerted effort, I think, maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, to educate people with disabilities to do jobs that they can do, which is not the case any longer, and hasn't been in a long time. I don't see anybody else for stack that I can.
Eduardo Castro just asked to be on stack with a question.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is my question. This is concerning special ed students. During the pandemic, how was their situation handled as far as the teaching and also the funding, the ADA funding? Do you hear me?
Yes, we did hear you, and I don't know if anyone has information on that. We were had a gentleman from the school board that was scheduled. He hasn't gotten on yet. That would have been able to answer that question directly. But if anyone has information regarding that,
I see Rosemary's hand.
Rosemary, did you want to speak to that specifically?
Yeah, I can just speak from the LA experience, knowing some special ed teachers. And of course, if you don't have enough staffing, not even substitutes, the programs can't be carried out for the students with special needs because no one knows how to do that. And if they get crowded into an auditorium, et cetera. So it's really just completely gone downhill.
Yeah.
And Yolanda has asked to be on stack. I don't know if you were done, Rosemary.
Okay, Yolanda.
And then Raphael and Joyce.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that my sister's son, he's about 50 now. He was born with cerebral palsy. And I know after his education was no longer possible because I guess they reach a certain age, they had I forget Howard or something center where people that were disabled, existing in a wheelchair, can get some kind of training, but I haven't talked with my sister nor her family since my father passed in 2014. So I don't know. Somebody just said they are no longer having those training schools. I don't know if they were paid the same wages as everybody else. I don't know if they were working because my sister lives in Modesto, so I don't go over there that much. But yeah, I know that they do have the profit, just like they have the profit for the prisoners, where they pay them like less than a quarter for an hour's work.
Yes, very good. Raphael.
Yeah, as to Eduardo's question, and as a general education teacher, I can tell you a lot of these students are left in a bad situation, worse than than most students, because you do require a higher level of accreditation for any special education. But what you find is a lot of shortage with qualified substitute, no less. So you find a lot of these students being basically just housed and I would say neglected throughout the day. So I'm not a special ed teacher, but in a general education class, I do see that phenomenon, and it's a sad situation. I think if anything, that deserves a whole discussion as educators.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. Joyce.
Yeah, I was just going to agree. I think we need this is a whole area. My sister works as a special ed teacher, and she's got a master's degree, and she doesn't get as much as a regular teacher to teach. There's all kinds of different situations in different kinds of schools, and I'm not an expert on it, but what we're really seeing is this privatization process that we call privatization has happened in so many ways and so many stages. It's disaggregated, the workforce, the teachers, the staff. And I think, what we're really seeing here is we're looking at all the pieces of how public ed has been destroyed and looking at what this latest piece, the real dominance of speculative capital, hedge fund capital, and and the direct control over all the local schools has just brought this to a level of total destruction. And I think it's just really clear from everybody's statements, that's where we are at.
Very good. Okay, so we're right at time for the next section. And I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to be watching a short video. And bring this up.
The American dream used to be owning your own home. Now it's being debt-free. Altogether, Americans owe a record-breaking $15 trillion and counting. Sold as a lifeline, debt is too often an anchor, dragging people down with compounding interest and fees, pulling wealth and resources from the working class to bloat Wall Street's bottom line. Every debt we hold is someone else's asset, with our monthly payments providing steady revenue streams for greedy creditors. Households with credit card debt pay around $1,155 a year in interest alone. Americans now die owing an average of $62,000, much of it credit card debt. A significant amount of the $770 billion of credit card debt sloshing around is medical bills. Ambulance rides, doctor's visits, and surgeries paid for with the swipe of a little plastic card. Then there's the additional $140 billion of medical debt and collections, combined with an estimated $50 billion in back rent and $1.4 trillion in auto loans. Much of this debt didn't exist a few generations ago. Consider the $1.8 trillion in student loans this country now holds, which wasn't a problem in the 1960s when college was often free, or close to it. Ronald Reagan helped change that. He made his name by demonizing protesters on the University of Berkeley campus. In 1967, as governor of California, he pushed the university system to start charging students tuition so they would, quote, think twice about whether they wanted to pay to carry a picket sign. During his career as senator, Joe Biden advanced Reagan's project, working to expand student lending. As a senator from Delaware, the credit card industry capital, Biden was a devoted servant of the financial sector. He fought relentlessly for 2005 legislation that weakened borrower protections and made bankruptcy more difficult for regular borrowers, strengthening the hand of the student loan and credit card industries and helping cause a wave of home foreclosures. But debt is not just about money, it's about power. Debt has long been both a source of profit and a tool of social control and racial domination. The founding fathers knew this. Thomas Jefferson argued that debt should be canceled after natural limits, which he took to be about a generation, but only for white men like himself. In 1803, he wrote that debt should be used as a weapon against indigenous people to steal their territory. We shall be glad to see the good and influential individuals among them run in debt, because we observe that when these debts get beyond what the individuals can pay, they become willing to lock them off by a cession of lands. Sharecropping, redlining, predatory lending all continued this trend, deepening racial inequities. As a result of the 2008 mortgage crisis, Black and brown families lost upwards of 50% of their collective wealth. For regular debtors, even a late payment can spell disaster. A tanked credit score can make it impossible to rent an apartment or get a job. Default on your student loans, the government can seize your wages, tax refunds, and Social Security. Debtors' prisons are technically unconstitutional, but in practice, people struggling to pay medical bills or court fees can wind up in jail. But not all debtors are treated so cruelly. Rich people regularly walk away from their obligations, and companies engage in strategic defaults. The banks that crashed the economy in 2008, they got bailed out. Donald Trump, the self-professed king of debt, left a string of corporate bankruptcies in his wake. And don't forget that during the COVID pandemic, the federal government spent hundreds of billions of dollars buying up bad corporate debt belonging to entities, including Exxon and Walmart, and offering companies, including payday lenders, forgivable loans. It's time regular debtors got a break too. It's time for a jubilee, the erasure of debts and a rebalancing of power between regular people and elites. It's not a new idea. Jubilee was described in the Bible, and many ancient civilizations had periodic jubilees to avert social and economic collapse. Our earliest recorded histories are stone tablets inscribed with credit ledgers. Nearly as long as debt has existed, debt cancellation has existed too. Throughout history, debtors have risen up to demand relief. In the early 6th century BCE, a debtors' riot helped nudge ancient Athens towards democracy. The reforms, known as the shaking off of burdens, included debt absolution and an end to debt bondage. Something similar happened in ancient Rome after debtors mounted the world's first general strike. In the United States, indebted workers and farmers revolted in the colonial era, and then again during the Great Depression. Later, the call for debt cancellation rang out at Occupy Wall Street. In recent years, striking debtors helped force the government to cancel billions of dollars in student loans. Abolishing medical debt, back rent, and student loans would free up money now spent on debt servicing for other things. People could buy homes and start families, and the racial wealth gap would narrow. Research estimates that canceling student debt alone would boost the economy by up to $108 billion a year and create 1 million jobs. Under pressure from activists, President Biden campaigned on a promise to cancel an immediate minimum of $10,000 of student debt per borrower. Thanks to the Higher Education Act of 1965, he has the power to cancel all federal student loans. With a single signature on an executive order, President Biden can free people from student debt, giving tens of millions of people their lives and futures back. Now, we need to make him do it, and much more. We deserve nothing less than a jubilee.
A jubilee. Okay. All right, you guys. Quite a bit there in that. I'm gonna bring my screen back up. And bring up the readings. Okay, so we have time for just a little discussion on that video, and then we'll go into the next section, but it's a lot to think about in that one. Anyone for staff?
Kim.
Okay, I see Raphael. Anyone else?
I think Kim King.
Okay.
Said her name. And Steve Miller.
Okay, got you. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Kim.
So just, speaking of the Democrats, it's really disappointing that Biden made this promise, to get elected. There's an active student cancel debt campaign, and there's millions of us around the country, including me, who still have student debt from, being from working class families and having the nerve to want to get a high quality education and even a PhD. In order to get that, you need money. If you don't have money, you got to take out loans. And there's so many people across the country who have these loans, some from, you know, where their degree didn't even pay off.
Mhm.
But it's just disappointing that Biden, it just shows that our system is not functioning, that the parties don't really represent anybody except the banks and the corporations, because I mean, of course, I'm glad Trump didn't win for re-election, but you know, Biden and the Democrats can't even figure out how to do the things that their people need to even re-elect them.
Mhm.
They're probably not even going to get reelected in the midterms because of these things. I mean, he could do right now, he could, but Biden also, when he was a senator, I believe, he actually wrote the bill that made it that students who get, if you get bankrupt, you can't count your student loan on your bankrupt bill. So if you get bankruptcy, I think Biden was actually the one who wrote that. So unfortunately, in our society, the corporations are the main people who donate to political campaigns, and therefore that's who they serve. So we just need a party that really represents the interests of the regular people. And I look forward to that happening at some point.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Raphael.
Yeah, I won't take much time because I really I agree with the previous speaker 100%. But I do want to ask, where can we get a copy of that video? I would love to show that to my seniors, and I'm teaching economics this semester, so I think that was powerful. The art was incredible.
Yes. So if we sent out readings for
Okay,
this
yeah.
lesson, and the link is in the readings along with all the full articles that we use excerpts from and all of that. So have at it. Steve.
I wanted to give a brief history of the Oakland public school debt. I was a teacher here in Oakland, for those who don't know, from 85 to 2011. And we had to fight these people every day. But once Jerry Brown became mayor, they fraudulently put Oakland into debt by just maneuvers in the legislature. And then the control of Oakland public schools was seized away from the city. That's when all the charter schools hit. Oakland has more charter schools per capita than any other place in California. So the debt still goes on. We're still in debt. They sell the debt to other people. We don't even know who owns it half the time. And so just recently, with a new school board that had people who are not beholden to the real estate industry, they said, okay, well, we're just not going to close the schools. We don't need to. It doesn't save any money to close schools. And at that point, FICMAT, which is a private corporation that has never been audited, which has been given political control, those guys said, well, if you don't do what we say, we're going to take you over again. And one of the things they want us to do is cut 40 million from the classroom in the middle of a pandemic, when they don't have sufficient fans, sufficient tests, sufficient anything. So, you know, this is, once you're ensnared, they have the whip hand, just like when you were on the plantation or sharecropping, you were in debt all the time. And that's the way they operate around here. But we should also be aware that cities throughout this country are massively in debt to Wall Street. Cities pay off millions and millions of dollars a month of tax money that goes to Wall Street to pay for the tricky loans that they were forced to take out in various ways. There is a connection to fascism here, because most of the basic needs that people need to survive are provided by local government and local areas, by counties for public health, by cities for schools. We saw that when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden there's free food at schools. Just come on by. Damn, nobody knew that before. But most of what we rely on is provided by cities, and therefore, if they can bust them, they start to cut off the basic things that we need. And we've all seen that. We all know what that is. So there is a real connection between debt and fascism in this situation.
Very good. Very good. So we'll take the two more that I saw hands raised, and then we'll get into the reading for part two. Ms. Vicky.
Oh, I was just going to add to what Steve was saying about the schools. As I was at the school board meeting Wednesday night, noticed that they literally waited until 1 o'clock in the morning to even bring, it was a 10-hour meeting, to even bring up the fact that they wanted to put closing schools back on there. And it did pass that they would be closing Oakland schools. It passed 5-2. So next week, they're going to give a list of the schools that they are intending to close. They'll vote on it the following week. So I just want to add that to what Steve was saying.
Which is crazy. Peter.
I wanted to add just a little bit to what Steve and Vicky were just saying. I appreciate that Steve enlarged this question of debt. And on a national and global basis, governments are literally being controlled by these networks of corporations because they're so deeply in debt, and the corporations, they're reliant on these financial corporations for the capital to literally operate. And if the corporations refuse to loan the money, or if they call in the debt, or if they simply withdraw their capital, in other words, stop investing in the local or regional area, the government simply can't operate. And we've seen this done in Spain, in Greece, in Argentina, and quite a number of countries have been brought back under control this way. And I just want to note that we're analyzing all this, not just so that we can know about it, but to figure out, how do we fight this?
Yes.
We can't just, we're learning. The people of Oakland are learning that we can't just talk to the school board, because the school board is under the control of someone. How do we take our fight to the someone? How do we win that fight? And there are people on this call who are putting forward important strategy and tactical ideas to do that. And I hope we'll hear from them.
Yes, yes, very good. We're going to move into this reading that goes directly to what we've been discussing. I'll start. Debt as a means of control. 22 years ago, back in 2000, California's passed Prop 39, which forced public school districts to let charter schools use more of their facilities at a time when the state was pulling back on its support for public education. By 2003, Oakland Unified School District had a $35 million budget deficit that forced a state takeover of the district. Elected and appointed state officials negotiated a $100 million state loan, far more than the deficit of 35 to 37 million, which forced the district to repay the state $6 million a year until 2026, further cutting the budget that would be spent on educating children in the public schools. Meanwhile, the number of charter schools in the district doubled, cutting state revenues to public education even more. Now the state is prohibiting OUSD from using legally authorized COVID funds to fully pay its debt, requiring $90 million in cuts and threatening another takeover if the district doesn't close 23 lower attendance schools in the lower income flatland area. How is this using debt as a weapon of social and political control? Oakland City Council member Carol Fife says Oakland's flatland elementary schools, the schools that educate most of our working class kids, are a victim of, quote, disaster capitalism. What does she mean by that? Sorry. There we go. What did she mean by that? She wrote that private interests want to own our schools, and there's no shortage of high-paid bureaucratic leaders who would hand the schools to them. They salivate over the money to be taken from OUSD, and people in administrative positions have helped manufacture the problems that would allow takeover. We have to tell them, hell no. I'll pass there. Anybody else would like to read?
I'll read.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Eli Broad, which rhymes with toad, created two Fortune 500 companies, Kaufman Broad Homes and Sun America Bank, with an estimated net worth of 6.7 billion. Eli Broad ranks as Ford magazine's 78th wealthiest man in the United States. But like many billionaires who create mechanisms to increase their wealth, Broad created a non-profit academy as is an entree into the private education market. The Broad Superintendent Academy attracts applicants who will willingly pay exorbitant tuition fees for the chance to get placed in a top management public education position. The Broad Academy only indoctrinates and commits its students to the privatization of public education and the generation of revenues for private corporations. When Broad placed his academy graduates in management positions at Oakland Unified School District, they left a trail of fiscal mismanagement, budget overruns, and demoralized staff, students, and teachers. Operating unethically and illegally, Broad managers use their training to cripple and plunder Oakland schools, privatizing Oakland School, Eugene Stovall, February 2020.
Yes. Okay, we're at our next discussion question. Why does capitalism need to use debt to function? Why does capitalism need to use debt to function? We all been talking about it. Stack is open.
I'll just start saying,
Mhm.
it's a form of social control. It keeps the working class like kind of subservient to these corporations and also entire governments on like a macro level. And yeah, so keeps us like subservient to these corporations, and then the political leaders who are also subservient to these corporations who are writing this policy, keeping the working class, down.
Absolutely. How about, okay, I see a couple more hands. I see Austin.
Austin, yeah.
I have to unmute myself there, folks.
Yes.
So in addition to what was just said, I have to move so we don't have an echo. In addition to what was just said, debt makes huge amounts of money for lenders. You owe, but the people you pay make money from the debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You finished, Austin, or did you have something else?
I am. That was my point.
Okay, thank you. Peter.
Yeah, well, in addition to what Austin and Raya just said, debt was one of the things that unleashed capitalism as an economic system, because going into borrowing money allows you to have the capital to do things you couldn't do. Now, of course, there was what they call primitive accumulation, where somebody with a farm killed the farmer next door and stole their farm, or they went to a country and took people as slaves. Those are forms of primitive accumulation, which is basically robbery. Some of the leading heroes of capitalism did just that, and I won't go into detail about that. But debt, the ability to borrow money freely, required breaking restrictions that were imposed by the churches on moral grounds. And once those restrictions were broken free from, it really unleashed people who got that capital to explore and take over property and extract wealth. In fact, one of the, and I've only learned this really recently, that one of the things that made the Spanish explorers so vicious in the Americas was that they were in debt and they were going to be in trouble if they went home without a bunch of money to pay off that debt. You know, people think of colonialism as a strictly European thing, but capitalism was developing in Asia, in China, but the ability of, they had mercantile capitalism, but their ability of Chinese capitalists to expand rapidly was limited because of philosophical restrictions on their ability to borrow money. And of course, I think more and more people know today that one of the huge things that caused the impoverishment of white farmers in the South during the slavery period was that they had no slaves to use as collateral. And that the slave owners used this like crazy to borrow money to enlarge their farms and take over the good land, preventing white farmers and freed blacks from getting any decent land. So I'll stop there because this makes me crazy.
Yeah, because it's crazy. Okay, on stack I have Joyce, Yolanda, Lewis, and Miss Emma. Go ahead, Joyce.
Yeah, I just wanted to you know, go back to some of the original discussions that we had earlier today on this point, because I think the history that Peter gave is wonderful. I think the other aspect to this is, you know, why is it that they're using that tool more than they ever have and in a greater devastation than they ever have? And I think that we got to just hook that again to this, both the political question and the question of the end of their ability to do other things. I mean, if they've got to end public schools because they no longer need kids, basically, and no longer need to educate them, how do you do that in a quote unquote democracy where people are not going to take lying down that you overtly say, we're going to end public schools and we're going to go in and destroy your public schools in the local area. We're going to take over your, you know, and Steve Bannon, basically, from what I understand, has basically already put out a very clear charge to his folk to, you know, really focus in on school boards and take them over. But I think the value, not only of the history of debt in capitalism and its fundamental, you know, its foundation in it, is at this point, they want to administratively, quote unquote, legally take over without admitting to what they're doing, and to do so in such a way that it looks like it's just some kind of problem with people on a local level handling their money, or you know, the ADA question that we raised and so forth. So it's a deeply political question as well, as we've been pointing out. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. Very good. Yolanda. You on mute?
I think she's trying to unmute.
Yeah, I think Austin said it. That's what I was thinking too, that it puts more control and more leverage for the lenders, like the banks. And I think because of that, it puts more of a wide gap between the 1%ers and the majority of the people that don't make, not, I can't remember any of the statistics, but I know a couple of times the People's Tribune and Rally Comrades has talked about how so many percentage of the upper class has the world combined with the majority of the working and the poor. So I think it does just kind of consolidate more the banks and the interest and impoverishes people more. And corporate fascism to me is when the government, as has been explained in other Zooms, when the government cares more about sustaining the corporations than meeting the people's needs. And in that sense, debt comes down to schools closing and children going further and more crowded classes, especially during COVID. And that's fascist and the total disregard for human life.
Very good. Lewis.
So I'm all about creating solutions, and it seems the most immediate thing for me is Newsom's running for election in 2022, and education unions have been his biggest backer financially. And I don't understand where the unions are at in this whole discussion. You know, why there isn't a union presence here and why the union is not more active around this, you know, as far as I can tell. But the public K-12 system should have the same moratorium on ADA that the community college system has on the student-centered funding formula, and that's the fall of 2024. You can't crash an educational system like COVID-19 did and expect it to recover in one semester, even if everybody was going to school with ADA. I mean, it's too much stress. The state has a $32 billion budget surplus. Some of that surplus can go to refunding our schools until they have time. The second thing is the people brought up the fact that our demographics have changed, and a lot of young people can no longer afford to live in Oakland or the East Bay. And that means that the number of kids going to school is dropping pretty radically. And it's just not here, it's across California. They figure maybe 10 to 20% by 2030. So that's going to mean either a lot of closures of schools or repurposing them for things like adult education and expanding those efforts and other community service events, you know, type things for those buildings, because those buildings have been bought and paid for by the taxpayers, and the local taxpayers should make a decision of what's going to happen with those, and not, you know, corporate interests that want to build things. So those are a couple of my immediate solutions, but I think trying to move back the ADA funding system until the fall of 2024, the same thing they've probably the UC system has the same issue around expanding, you know, putting a debt moratorium on until 2024.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Next on stack is Miss Emma. You're muted, Miss Emma. Hold on.
Yeah, I have a friend that wanted to go to any college. He has he kind of wanted to go to any college. They kind of wanted to go to school anyway. It's bad, educated. He don't want them to go anywhere because of his disability. And I went to any college.
Hold, let me translate what she said. She's gonna do a second part, but let me translate the first part. She says she has a friend who wants to go to college, Laney College, but for some reason he is being prevented. And if he cannot be able to be admitted at Laney College, where then will he get an education? And he's trying to better himself, and that there are barriers. And then she was about to say what her experience was going to Laney College.
Mm-hmm.
I don't Laney College. Laney College. It was a video me because
I don't understand your words. Speak up, not softer, louder.
I went to Laney College. I have lots of videos. The elevators when I work, I could not do nothing. I tried to hide because she lied to me. She put in because she didn't, but I could.
She said when she went, she experienced multiple barriers, including that the equipment oftentimes didn't work for elevators because she is wheelchair bound. She needed note takers that she was supposed to be allocated by law that were often were not provided for. When she complained to her counselors, she said, and this is her words, that the counselor lied to her and said that she was going to put the request in, but it was not done. And that ultimately she was forced to quit.
Yeah.
May I had my hand up for me.
Yes. So here's who's next on stack, and then we got 4, and at the end of the 4, we'll move to the next bit of the reading. We have Carl, Ethel, Mario, and then Peter. Carl.
I wanted to speak to 2 parts, but also to the Broad Foundation piece, but I'm going to speak for a moment. The question that was raised around the debt. The debt it's a double-edged sword around the question of education, because it has historically been inadequate funding for education, and particularly where there's predominantly students of color. In California, that was not a problem until Prop 13. When Prop 13, there was actually defunding of public education that took place. And the Mickey Mouse jerry-rigging of raising public education fund based on property taxes has always been a challenge in many ways. And in fact, funding of education, one of the meetings I was at, it should be federalized. It should not be by regions, it should not be by county, it should not be by state, but the federal government should fundamentally fund public education. And what happens is when the education system does not have enough funding, it begins to rely upon debts or securities or whatever to raise funds to create buildings and so forth. Now, the challenge has been around the question of utilizing debt as a predatory system in the educational system, in the sense that it basically simply says that it is not the community that owns the school, but the ones who basically finance the debt owns the school. And they get to dictate in these meetings that they have. They have their representative attend these meetings for around the question of property facility built out and so forth, that they get to dictate how those facilities will be built, who will get those jobs. So historically, it's been privatized and consistently the question around funding and with funding for public education. The capitalist class do not want to fund education. They want to fund their people, just like the slave owners wanted to fund their people, their kids, to send them to Europe and different places. So the question of public funding has always been a contested struggle with the working class and poor to have funding that will be made for education for all. So that has been a battle, since Reconstruction period. But the other piece I just want to speak quickly about, which is about the Bro Foundation. This is just my own experience here in Sacramento. In Sacramento, and it's in line with the whole charter movement, in line to the codification and privatization movement that takes place. What happened is that prior to we had a new superintendent back in, I think in 2009, 10. This is an economic crisis. Everyone would say it was declining enrollment. The sky was falling. We need to do something. So they brought this trained superintendent to come in. And he sold a lot of wolf tickets to the public and to the community that he can solve the problem. And he proceeded to do school closure. But it was the movement of youth, community, and we were able to get the union on board to fight a lot of this school closure. We wasn't able to stop all the school closure, but as many of them, we were able to stop the school closure, because we knew the whole thing around school closure was closely in alignment with gentrification that was taking place, that they wanted these school buildings for this new population, highly mobile, upper income population that they wanted to provide these schools for their private schools that they wanted. And lastly, the argument, these Bro Foundation argument was, oh, we're having declining enrollment. And we said, okay, so there's declining enrollment, which means now we've been fighting we want 21-to-1 teachers. We're going to get it now. So they said, oh, no, we need to have 30 students in a classroom. So they will close schools, push it back up to 30-to-1 or 35-to-1. And the quality of education began to decline dramatically because they refused to provide the funding that was necessary to have smaller class size, to provide additional support and services and the rest. But a lot of this will take a fight to do, from unions in terms of social justice unionism, from the community, from students and youth, to you really keep the struggle on and the push going forward.
Yes, thank you. Ethel.
Nice job, Carl. Excellent overview and historical presentation. I think I wanted to just obviously underscore maybe three big chunks, but Carl just made them, real life for us in terms of the battle and where we're at. So clearly, we're talking about just two aspects to what we're are looking at. Why the debt, and why the debt in relationship to these public institutions. And it most definitely represents a power grab. But one part of that power grab is because it's a mechanism for replacing the profits that they can no longer secure at the point of production. They are squeezing out the guts in the public sector, be it the delivery of education, the delivery of public services. In our cities, we see, someone spoke earlier to the devastating cuts in our libraries, in our parks, etc. These are all, from the standpoint of the capitalist system, it's all making money for them. As soon as it becomes quote unquote privatized, we really mean corporatized, right? But I also want to say it also, we have to now say that it also is a secondary aspect. The attack on CRT, the attack on
on essentially education about American history and the role of supremacy, white supremacy, male supremacy, etc., not only represents a power grab, but it represents a political goal to facilitate pitting the one section of the class against the other so as to ensure corporate dictatorship. It is informing a particular stage and form of a fascist offensive. And all of these things are happening. And I think that Carol's watchword that Carl just underscored, really, if we put the two together, we really see them. And everybody else has, of course, spoken to this as well. And so I think I think the third part is why then, or how then is the relationship to the attack on voting rights? Well, of course, the attack on voting rights, which the great majority of the working class has never had. It has been a fight from the inception of the country. But the particular move at this point to deny, to suppress the vote, subvert the vote, and stop the process. They're very interconnected. They're an interconnected strategy of corporations to dismiss any of the old form of bourgeois democracy, any pretense of democracy, while installing and further in codifying their role as dictatorship. And I think that in our local municipalities, the same way that Carl described that process in his city, we can go any city USA, it is going on. And I think we have to make sure that oftentimes the fight against CRT is against its white supremacy aspect, but the hidden hand of corporations to grab us by the throat and control our class, their hand is hidden. The hand of Wall Street is hidden. And I think that the importance of these kinds of gathering is that we must expose and show that so we can build our unity and build towards reconstruct what we need to secure these public resources stay in the hands of the people and reject these debt proposals by these corporations. Damn the debt, take care of the people. I'll close on that.
Very good, very good. Mario is next on stack.
Hi, everybody. I want to apologize. I don't have a camera. I'm on an old computer here. But I want to, first of all, appreciate all that has been shared here in the conversation today, especially the links between what's going on in education, what's going on in other places in society in terms of debt in general, homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. I just wanted to speak briefly to the one thing that I have not heard anyone mention today as we talk about, them who we're struggling against, et cetera. And I want to just raise specifically the two political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, both are part of this machine that's grinding us to dust. Mm-hmm. And as long as we support even the Democratic Party, we're putting the nails in our own coffins. So I hope I'm not being too revolutionary here for you, League of Revolutionaries. But I think our first task and our first step toward freedom doesn't cost a thing. Deregister from the Democratic and Republican parties. Let's show them that that we're not going to buy their crap any longer, and we should stop giving them money and not fall for the bait of, oh well, if you don't vote for us, then you're going to get a Republican. Well, what's the effing difference between the two? There is none. So I also want to apologize. I've been putting off. I have another job I have to go to. So thank you very much for this event. And hi to my friend Gloria down in Merced. Hey, Gloria. Thank you all. I'm sorry I have to go and can't stay with you for the rest of the conversation.
Okay, thank you Mario. So much, Mario.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Peter, you're last on stack, and then we're going to move on to the rest.
Mario kicked it off for me. I mean, I want to appreciate the people who have already raised the things we can and need to start taking up, and Lewis's question about the unions. I can see a dozen people involved in public education on this video who have been banging our heads against our unions leadership for years and years. And one of the first things to do is to build the way to challenge our unions to break free of the Democratic Party control, because they are controlled. They are elements of control of the Democratic Party, the corporate Democratic leadership. And I mean, Kimberly and Lewis and I have seen this for years in our Peralta Federation of Teachers Union. Great people, dedicated unionists, but narrow, narrow, narrow. I want to go on from there. There are people who are beginning to talk in the Oakland Public Schools about setting up community school safety councils. Just go around the district, organize our own councils that say that talk throughout the community, including the students, including the teachers, including administrators, including everybody, and say, this is what we need, and we're going to organize to do this. This is governance. And as one of our other great local leaders, Carol Fife, said in the Moms for Housing struggle, if they won't govern, we know how to govern. We'll govern. And this is the beginning of preparing our practical platform for governance that leads to the next thing, which is, as Mario said, we have to begin discussing a new kind of political apparatus, a new kind of political party that can actually bring this challenge, because none of the existing parties, including some very good efforts that are going on of small party forming organizations, but this all needs to come together in a much bigger way through lots of these councils to form a new kind of political party. And it's not going to look like anything we've ever had. But its platform basically needs to say, geez, now who was it? Someone just said it, fund it fully. They never say that funding the military is inflationary. They never say there's not enough money for the military. There's always enough money. Bullshit. We call BS, just like the kids at Marjorie Stoneman High said. We call BS. There's plenty of money if it's there to be if it's given, and so fund it. And that's the basic call of a new party: is fund this and fund that and fund this and do the climate and get out of the way anybody who's trying to stop that.
Very good. Okay. So we're all moving on one accord. We did talk about, the issues with the Democratic Party in our discussion, which is kind of on this last section here. So you guys, everybody can see that? I hope.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So in 1998, Eli Broad, rhymes with Toad, recruited Jerry Brown, the former governor of California and a former presidential contender, to become mayor of Oakland. Broad needed someone with Brown's political clout with the Democratic Party to implement his plans to privatize Oakland schools. Broad had been a close personal friend of Jerry Brown's father, Pat Brown, and had influenced all of Jerry Brown's political campaigns. Now, Broad realized California's top Democrat and his control over the statewide Democratic Party machine gave him a unique opportunity to make money for private education. And that's an excerpt also from Privatizing Oakland Schools from Eugene Stovall, February last year. Okay. So we have a discussion question, but we're going to continue with the reading and then discuss it. So this question is, how does the ruling class control us without being obvious about it? Today, the corporations use the state apparatus to guarantee their interests and their profits, whatever it takes. The relationship between capitalist and worker, that is the basis of capitalism, is being destroyed. But the class representing those who own and run the corporations as private property tend to guarantee that they retain power, wealth, and privilege under whatever new form the economic system takes. The state continues to grant corporations, which extract wealth from society for the owning class, unlimited rights and powers. The role of the state apparatus in society today is the same as the slave-owning class of the US, as historian Kenneth Stamp put it, to make, quote unquote, to make them stand in fear. Force is the leading aspect of control of the new fascist reorganization of the state. You can find examples of this throughout history, but you can also find many changes taking place today to develop a, quote, new fascism. The fascism needed today is to control a growing mass of people who are marginalized and cast aside as unnecessary and useless in a fully electronic, digital, AI-oriented economy. Today, the ruling class is making the changes needed to use a highly aggressive, militarized fascist state to control a population fighting just to survive. A thorough discussion and a good understanding of the development of the state and the fascism of the 21st century will help us in our daily practical work. The ruling class works to consolidate a new fascist society, aiming its fire at all who no longer add to their profit. Our new class has a leading role in transforming society. Today, there is the ability to have an abundance of food and housing and have quality education and healthcare, to live a cultured life. We can fight forward with the understanding that robotic digital production can be publicly owned, and the abundance it creates can be distributed to all without money. And that is from Raleigh Comrades. So I'm gonna go back to our question here. How does the ruling class control us without being obvious about it? Okay, I see Austin wants to get on stat. Go ahead, Austin.
Once again, I have to unmute myself. Sorry about that. I wanted to start answering that question by saying that the ruling class sets different rules for itself than it does for the rest of us. And it doesn't usually tell the rest of us about what those rules are. For us, debt is an obligation. It must be paid off because it's wrong not to. We also get punished. Not paying our debts can destroy our credit. But as Peter just said, they never say debt is bad for funding the military. And as Donald Trump told us, being a millionaire who doesn't pay taxes makes him smart.
Mm-hmm.
That's it from me.
Very good. Ethel.
Yes, I think this is an extremely important question. And so I'd like to start with unpacking what the ruler's strategy is. And I'd have to say that at this juncture, it is to essentially say that the life of the working class that is not exploitable is worthless. We see this in a multiple of manners, but the question of the market is preeminent over public health. We see this in other expressions, that we are one another, i.e. workers, that we are one another's enemy, not a system that does not feed, clothe, house, educate, provide protection to the majority. And so instead of those things, or even as people have pointed out, with the president, who has made it a question of that, well, he might consider doing $10,000 of release of debt, but certainly couldn't do, forgiving the debt. And why not? Well, because his relationship with the he is a part of the shield for the owning class. But I'd like to push back a little bit on this question of how we unleash this class to and untether it from its the ideas of the rulers that I've cited, but also from the control of the rulers. And right now there are workers in the Democratic Party. So I like to be careful when I say the Democrats, because millions of people are not the rulers. They're in there fighting to try to get their loans forgiven, and they're getting poo-poo in their face that that party is not providing that. They're in there fighting to decommodify housing, to establish social housing, these different expressions. And to the degree that they are beginning to fight, they don't yet have unity because the ruling class is really fostering a great deal of disunity and making it seem like the efforts done by our class to liberate itself and the environment are futile, can't be won. Nothing can be done but sit here and beg them. And I think that if it might serve us to better think about, yes, we need third party effort, but yes, that means unleashing our class to fight continuously for each and everything that they need and demand not only government accountability, but the damn parties. And I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican, damn it, that they provide what the people need, and all this distraction is not solving the problem. So I just think if we think about those things, then they're not generalities. And that's what I see amongst people who are trying to get beyond labels, progressives. They know that that's not going to save them. They're trying to figure out how do they fight forward for what they need. And I think if we can help unleash that with a clear class pursuit of interests, clearly stamped. And we would say, people would say partisan, and I mean partisan class, not partisan party. That's the road. So that's how they hide it. And I think that's the road to throwing the sunlight on and breaking these things open.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I did also, I'm gonna put myself on stack. The discussion of either, we absolutely need a third party, right? And I do believe we're in the beginnings of that process, but there are people that are fighting within the party. Everybody's heard about the squad. There's more and more what they would call, again, these labels that Ethel, mentioned, the progressive candidates. But it's not that they're progressive only, is that they're fighting for, basic needs. But importantly, they're not taking any corporate money. And they're being fought harder within the party than any label or stigma that the Republicans can put on them. And we're in this process of fighting within the Democratic Party for what we need and breaking up the Democratic Party from within, which is also part of this process that's important. But what do we do? Mario had mentioned, deregistrating from the Democratic Party. I would agree with that. But then it would be really a concerted effort getting these working class forces either as candidates and elected into the party, because we still unfortunately have this two-party system that has a stranglehold on debates, expression, media coverage, which is also corporate. And it's going to be, a fight from every step, from every system, every institution that we have.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to give an example that I think is very much upon us. Two. One is recently the workers of Georgia who have labored hard for voting rights told the president of this United States, if you are not going to bring the receipt on voting rights, don't come.
Yes.
We do not want to be in your photo ops. We don't need more photo ops. We need a real dedication to ensuring this. Now, this is really, we can say, well, that's not deregistering. I'm sorry, this represents something very big that is developing. Another example to the right, Tom Friedman just wrote a piece. I've always hated the man, but he just wrote a piece, and maybe others saw this in the New York Times, where he said, Well, for 2024, who should be the likely presidential candidates is Biden and Cheney. That would ensure that the Democratic Party would in fact win. So we can see in each of these instances, this is an example of, will it be a corporate party? And we all know the answer, or what will be the journey to an independent? I think if we think about it like that, the journey to independent class politics, and the workers of Georgia are already setting the example. Where in the world do you see in the latest People's Tribune, Latasha's interview is there? Take a look at it. Or just go to CNN and see one of the co-founders of the voting rights effort tear Mr. President a new ass. It's happening, my friends. And we just can't be locked into one way of thinking about it. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but I wanted to highlight those things because I think we might miss the boat if we, because it's right here in front of us, but we might miss it because we're looking for something else.
Right.
I'll yield the floor.
Okay. Anybody else for Stack?
I've got my hand up, but I'd love to hear from some people who haven't spoken yet. There's a lot of folks out there with good ideas, good thoughts.
Yep. Okay, go ahead, Peter. Don't see anybody yet.
Well, I really agree with everything that's been said. And we have to recognize that we operate on 2 feet with 1 foot in the day-to-day reality. Which includes that there are people within the Democratic Party who are fighting tooth and nail to hold it accountable and make it do the things people need it to do. I don't think anybody's trying to pretend we can do that in the Republican Party. But as scientists, as people who try to think scientifically about the way things are going and what forces are present, we have to recognize that the corporate leadership of the Democratic Party is an absolutely crucial element in the control of capital. They count on this, and they, in the spirit of the question that's being asked, how do they control us without being obvious? They use inclusive language. They talk about people with disabilities, and they have all the right gender pronouns, and they have the right holidays. And they're still putting us out of jobs. They're still putting us out on the street, and they're destroying public education, and they're allowing and they're facilitating corporations to take all this over. So we know that they're not going to give up leadership of that organization. I'm going to jump history here and go back to 1854. The abolitionist movement was working within the Whig Party. There was no Republican Party. There was no anti-slavery party, and they were fighting tooth and nail to get the Whig Party to take up a stand against slavery. And when they realized it was not going to happen, they split from it. They created the Republican Party, and they said, screw y'all. And in 6 years, and these folks only had the telegraph. They didn't have the internet. 6 years, they held political power. They held both houses, the executive, and right after that, they got the judicial. And of course, then there was a war, and we'd like to avoid that. But we're at the point where a new kind of political apparatus has to enter our discussions. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh, ignore all the rest and let's just, jump light years ahead. But we're at that point where we have to be realistic about what's possible for the Democratic Party, and not to dishonor the people who are fighting within it. We're all one fight. I'll stop there.
Very good. Very good. Anyone else for Stack? I see Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
Excuse me. First of all, just some background. We should all be aware that the people who push charter schools more than anybody else are the corporate Democrats, not the Republicans. And so Eli Broad is totally a Democrat. He passed recently. These guys are part and parcel of what goes on in California, which is a totally Democratic state, right? I forget the term for that. Secondly, we should be aware that there are two initiatives right now gathering signatures to put vouchers on the up for a vote in the elections this year. It could be in June, it could be in November, it could be both. We don't know yet. So in addition, it turns out also that there is an amendment to the state constitution that we will be voting on apparently. And that amendment is all about parents' rights. Parents can begin to file suit against various school districts, as like in Texas, right? Same idea, to file suits because their child is not given a quality education. They're not talking about the parents in Oakland. They're talking about the parents in the suburbs. And we should be aware under these COVID conditions that the Chicago teachers, when they proposed that they would deliver education online, and Lori Lightfoot eliminated public education altogether by closing the schools and shutting down their accounts. These guys have said, we just want the Chicago system to do what the charter schools are doing, what the private schools are doing, and what the rich suburb schools are doing. This is why, another reason why you have this push to stay open, because the rich parents' schools are doing fine. No, I mean, not perfect, right? But they got resources. They can put their students into small dispersed groupings around their not pleasant campuses with trees and everything like that, rather than put them out on the cement playground, which is what we face, you know, in the flatlands and universally across the country, pretty much in the urban areas. So this stuff is heading our way. At the same time, you know, they don't want to talk about this, but public education is a public good. And a public good means that the public should have the power to control that public good. We're not going to give it to private forces who then tell us that that's what Deborah Dix did for Trump's head of his pandemic thing, right? We're going to release the market and its power will do everything. Well, it didn't do anything, right? They can't even get the test things out. I mean, we can have a war and build missiles in months, right? But we can't get the tests out. And so this whole mess is transforming before our eyes. We don't know what school's going to look like in 2 weeks or so. Omicron probably will go away, but what about the next variant? You know, we just can't allow the market to quote unquote solve the problem because they're incapable of solving the problem. They won't put the people in charge, and that's the only way you can solve this problem.
Very good. I have Yolanda next on stack.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about the Democratic Party is their red baiting, the red bashing, especially against China and Russia, North Korea and Cuba. And Biden did not reinstate the pact that Obama had with Cuba. And to me, I personally don't envision a third party because I'm registered Green Party, and I vote Green Party, but I voted for Biden because I don't want to see the undocumented immigrants who have been deported under Trump, which I think he would have done. But I think that whatever party might come out of a struggle or struggles, and even if there's no party, one thing I noticed is that when Nelson Perry was alive, he at a meeting in Chicago when I was part of the editorial board for the People's Tribune, he talked about running elections, running for office to spread ideals of socialism and communism. And I hope I'm not out of bounds, but I think that whatever steps we take along with the fight against fascism, which is going, is the fight to defend the idea, the socialist and communist ideals, because not those of us that do talk about a different kind of society where people's needs are met, which is what communism is, are going to be really hard up. I think Biden tried to start the right way because I think he knows that a lot of progressives supported him. But I know as soon as right in the beginning of his term, he said on TV, somebody asked him if he would get rid of his stocks and bonds and his whatever else that's called. And he said no, he would not. So I think that, and I cannot participate because I just wouldn't know what to do. But I think just some kind of Zoom on with the league on education and the homeless and the immigrants, maybe different subjects on the fight between what private property is, again, I keep pointing to how during the COVID, the trillionaires, people, they doubled the people billionaires, and it all went because of money. Right now we see money, and I read that in a Rally Congress article. So the only thing I'm trying to say is we got to fight against fascism along with the right to freedom of speech, the right to fight for socialism and communism and spread those ideals. That's what elections were supposed to be about. That's what they were about in the Soviet Union, in Russia before the Soviet Union.
Russia.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so one thing is that, what we do here is try to, bring consciousness to the people that are really out there on the fronts of struggle. We'll never be a political party, but we are trying to influence and be part of that process that's underway. Anybody else for Stack on this closing subject? Okay. Wow.
Carl.
Oh, Carl. Okay, I see your hand, Carl.
Slow and move and reaching for it. I'm sorry about that. I'm I know some folks are registered green. I've historically been registered Peace and Freedom Party since I was able to register to vote. So, but I truly believe that in the electoral politics, we do need a new electoral party, a working class party, led by people of color, grounded by the working class and poor. But to do that, it has to happen two ways. One, those who fight the good fight within the Democratic Party to accentuate the contradictions in the Democratic Party between the corporate and the more progressive. We need to support the progressive. We need to support all those who do the right thing. And we need to have communication and dialogue to have principled positions on both sides, because they cannot get through the Democratic Party unless they know that there are those of us on the outside supporting them, helping them to move, to break the Democratic Party. I truly believe that the Democratic Party needs to be broken, split, and then those of us revolutionaries and others in the community who are not connected to any political party come together in this new electoral party. But those of us who are revolutionaries still have work to do outside of the electoral party. We still have to do the organizing. We still have to do the fight. We still have to clarify for the rest. And the example that's, I don't know if it was Peter or Steve raised, that how the capitalist class, the ruling class, is constantly misleading, putting smoke, false ideology and false thinking around. For example, parents the right to sue schools for quality education. Sounds good. I mean, most parents would love it. but it is basically a Trojan horse for
There you
charter
go.
schools.
There you
Yeah.
And
go.
so we need to expose what these truly is, what these are, and say, listen, we understand parents have a concern about public schools. We know that it's an industrial, it was an industrial model, it was never designed for us. We're going to fight to transform and to change it. But we're fighting for a liberatory school. We're fighting for something more than what currently exists. And what they are selling through these initiatives and various folks who come under the, the auspice of the charter schools, we need to expose, and we need to tell, part of our organizing is not only to acknowledge the problems and the limitation of our current public education system, which is we fought hard for, and our ancestors have fought hard for to get us to where we are at. But we also understand the limitations of it, but that charter schools, vouchers, and the rest is basically creating an apartheid system in the educational system. And I generally tell our parents who are very frustrated with the public system and want to move over to charter system, I basically say, listen, there is absolutely unequivocally no accountability. I can't give you the kind of accountability that you would be able to have in a public education. I can't get them removed because they have their own, even though they are a nonprofit, quote, quote, they pre-select who they want on the board. They pre-select who they want to corporate folks to provide managing of all of that. You have no say. So all this talk of taking public money for private purposes is clear example of that is not public accountability and public control and parent control. So we may have to be very, very specific about who we're supporting, who we're working for, who we're fighting for, and wherever allies we can work with, let us work with those allies, particularly those who are trying to fight the good fight within the Democratic Party. I work with a couple of my friends who are working Democratic Party. I always tell them, my heart goes out to you, but I can't go there with you. I'll give you some advice. I will tell you how to work it, but I just don't have what you have. And I can't take the fight the same way. But I truly believe that if we're going to build a new working class, multiracial, electoral party, that and I said this will be electoral party. This will not be a revolutionary party. Revolutionary party fights not only in the electoral arena, it fights in the grassroots, civic. It fights in many arenas, not just simply in the electoral arena. So, but it is clear that if we want to build that next, fight for, we need to push for it, educate folks for it. But in the meantime, support them to get as many concessions, struggle to educate folks, because I like the idea of what took place with the folks in Georgia when said if you come you're going to have to address the issue about voting rights because that's fundamental, and it's basic to our struggle. So anyway,
very good. Very good, Carl. You're absolutely right.
Carl, I work with the other half of your family. And so I've heard your name for many years. Glad to make your acquaintance.
Likewise.
Okay, Joyce.
No, I'll wait.
Well, there's nobody else on Stack Mamas. So.
No, I just think, this is a really important discussion because we've got a real sense of both what's got to be done in the immediate fights that are going on. But I think what I'm really hearing is this sophistication around, I think what Ethel was saying too, it's how are we going to understand the process from where we are today to where we know there is a really forming up of the people who are the most affected by these situations, and And I think, you know, this struggle around understanding how capitalism works in defeating the fights that are going on around public education. And we know, again, and I know, you know, Kim, you work in public service sector, you've seen it at the port, you know, other places. The reality of it is that we're entering a stage where giving the fighters the ability to not just follow things down to the weeds, but to really see how this process works and how we can really not allow our folk to get pulled in, and then begin to not only do the kind of demands that are already being fought for, but to begin this process on a whole new level of creating the kind of political apparatus for electoral politics and then for the struggle overall. That's probably, you know, I mean, it's never been seen in the world. I mean, we're at such a new stage of development that this really is, you know, a revolutionary process in the deep sense that we're creating totally new forms of not only how to fight, but how to represent what is an international global class of people being thrown out of this system. So I just wanted to say I'm deeply impressed by the level of sophistication, and I hope that our educational work going forward can really show some results. Thank you.
Yes, yes, very good. Okay, anyone else for STAC? Everyone?
Madam Chair, did you
Yes,
see
ma'am.
my appeal to you about maybe we formally end the, first of all, bravo to the Clio team. Y'all threw down and handled your business. Much love to you all. Great session. And if we formally end it, I think that the Nina Turner video is an excellent example about how this process around third-party journey is beginning to take expression, but also how the fighters, you know, in much the spirit and sense that Carl and others have laid out, how that is happening in real time, because the thing around voting rights was just one expression, but there are others. And I just think people want to grab that video because you can use it in a lot of different places, but I think I'd like to send off people with that. So you know, the Clio's got to make your own decision on what you do, but I wanted to offer that. And I sent it to you in a link. I can put it in the chat, but just let me know what you'd like to do.
Yes, if you could put it in the chat, Ethel, that would be great. Because everybody has the ability to save the chat and have that information available.
All right, will do.
Does everyone know how to save their chat? If you don't, go down to the bottom of your chat window while Kim, the chair, is setting that up. Go down to the bottom of your chat window. There are 3 little dots at the bottom right corner. Click on those. It puts out a menu, and at the top it says Save Chat. And you want to do that several times during a meeting, but make sure you save the end so that it doesn't save everything that's happened. It doesn't save anything that hasn't happened yet.
Right. So you have to continually save the chat. And then you get, you know, all the stuff that people put in and this good information. Well, great meeting, everyone. I hope everyone was able to get some good information. We didn't have all of our speakers available today, but well, actually it worked out okay. So I want to, okay, so it's in there. So everybody save chat. Thank you, Ethel.
Sure.
So if anyone is interested in joining the organization and working on doing a lot of, you know, events like this and any other work that you're involved in to help raise the consciousness of people, you can contact the individual that invited you to this event today. I encourage people to also visit our website, lrna.org. There's postings of other events that's happening in other areas of the organization, as well as national events as well will be coming up. It's going to be a third segment on fascism that we've been working on. Also, to visit our Rally Comrades, which is the voice of the League, that is our paper. And there are, at the end of the readings that were sent out as a part of this lesson, there's a link to the latest Rally Comrade article that was used in excerpts for our lesson, as well as other pieces that were used as well. So I encourage you to visit Rally Comrades often and see the great work that's happening there. So we are ending on time. This is like amazing. First meeting that this has happened. So any other closing comments that anybody might have or want to share? Okay. Well,
I want to appreciate all the people who commented and all the people who took part in the meeting, whether you commented or not. We're all trying to learn in this process. No one's coming in on a high horse here, and I've learned a lot in this meeting.
Yes, I have some excellent comments. So, okay, anything else? All right.
Thank you so much, Kim. Wonderful.
Thank you, Kim.
Everybody.
And everybody, all the Cleo.
Thank you,
Great job.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.
Yep, very good.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you, Peter.
Great seeing you.
Teach your children well. Their father's help did slowly go by.